The Galactic Council chamber was filled with mocking laughter that echoed across the grand marble walls, the kind of laughter that dripped with arrogance and disbelief. Earth. One delegate sneered, his scales glinting under the golden light. You mean those primitive bipeds from the Sol system? They call that an army? Another alien barked out a laugh, his fangs gleaming. They still use bullets, don't they? How quaint. Even the Chancellor of the Council smiled, leaning back in his throne, eyes gleaming with cold amusement. Let them send their little soldiers, he said softly. The Zarkan Dominion will crush them before lunch. The room roared in agreement. No one believed the humans could fight. No one believed they could even understand what war truly meant. To the galaxy, humanity was a young, loud, emotional species, known for trading art, songs, and cheap metal, not for fighting wars. They were newcomers to the stars, still finding their balance, still learning the rules that older civilizations had lived by for millennia. But humanity had never been known for following rules. On the edge of the Orion Arm, the war had already begun. The Zarkan Dominion, an empire of proud reptilian warriors, had invaded 3 border worlds, slaughtering colonies and enslaving the survivors. When Earth's ambassadors pleaded for negotiation, they were laughed out of the chamber. Stay out of it, the council told them. This is not your concern. But humans had always been stubborn about injustice. When they sent word that a fleet would respond, the council laughed again, dismissing it as bravado. The Zarkan commanders prepared for an easy victory, expecting a swarm of old cargo ships armed with cannons. They waited for the humans to arrive so they could make an example out of them. But when the first Terran ships appeared at the edge of the system, the laughter died. There were no trumpets, no heroic announcements, no broadcasts of vengeance. The Terran fleet came in silence. 200 ships appeared in formation, not sleek or beautiful, but brutal, efficient, all matte gray steel without insignia. They carried no flags, no symbols of pride or empire. Their hulls were scarred and dull, built for function, not glory. The alien observers laughed again when they saw the small size of the vessels. That's it, said a Zarkan admiral, his scaled fingers tapping the armrest. That's their mighty army. The Terran ships didn't answer. They didn't open comms. They didn't posture. They simply took up formation in perfect alignment and stopped. Not a single engine flare. Not a single unnecessary movement. Just waiting. For 2 full days, the Zarkan fleet circled them, taunting them over open channels. Terrans, are you lost? One captain jeered. This isn't your trade route. Another sent a direct transmission to the human flagship. If you're too scared to fight, we'll make it easy. Surrender now, and we'll let your children live. No response. The humans remained utterly still, not even returning the scans that brushed across their hulls. It unnerved the Zarkans more than they admitted. They're broken already, their admiral said, forcing a laugh. But deep down, unease began to creep through their ranks. The Zarkan fleet was vast, over 5,000 ships, each one larger than the Terran cruisers by double. They had fought countless wars, conquered half a galaxy, and defeated species that had existed long before humanity learned to make fire. Their confidence was carved from centuries of victory. Yet something about the Terran silence was wrong. It was too calm, too measured. Every time the Zarkans tried to provoke them, their sensors recorded faint, shifting anomalies around the human formation. Tiny movements, subtle fluctuations in heat signatures. Drones were sent to investigate, but none returned. The Zarkans thought it was interference. It wasn't. On the human flagship, the bridge was quiet. Admiral Elaine Reeves stood at the center, her uniform immaculate, her voice low, her face calm. They're scanning us again, her tactical officer said. Let them, she replied, eyes fixed on the display. Fleet position locked. Locked and stable, the officer confirmed. Reeves nodded once. And the ground teams? Already in position, came the answer. Good, she said. Then, as if speaking to herself, she whispered, let them laugh. Beneath the surface of 3 occupied worlds, Terran stealth transports had already landed days before. The soldiers of the Terran Expeditionary Force were ghosts, trained to move in silence, equipped with armor that blended into the shadows. They were not loud, not angry, not reckless. They were professionals. The youngest among them had fought for 20 years. The oldest had seen entire campaigns across the void. To them, war wasn't glory. It was a job, a grim, precise, necessary job. They moved through the alien cities like phantoms, disabling power grids, cutting communications, tagging targets. Civilians didn't even know they were there. And when the command came, they would strike all at once. Back in orbit, the Zarkans finally lost patience. Open fire, their admiral barked. Teach these mammals their place. Thousands of cannons charged and unleashed a storm of plasma, a blinding curtain of light that crossed the void in seconds and tore through space where the Terran fleet had been. Explosions filled the dark. The Zarkans cheered, until the light faded. The Terran ships were gone. Not destroyed. Gone. The sensors showed nothing. The space they had occupied was empty, silent. Confusion turned to fear. Did they jump? No hyperspace readings. Then where are they? The Zarkans didn't know that in the same instant they fired, the Terran fleet had moved, every ship vanishing into cloaked trajectories that no alien radar could track. The first Zarkan cruiser to die didn't even know it was under attack. One moment it was patrolling. The next, its reactor imploded. No warning. No shot fired. The second ship went offline, its power grid overwritten by code older than the Dominion itself, Terran code. Within minutes, a dozen ships lost control of their weapons, firing on each other in panic. "We're being hacked," one officer screamed. "Lock systems manually." But every command was already rewritten. Every defense, every firewall, gone. "Who's doing this?" "They are," whispered a technician, "the humans." And then, for the first time, the Terran fleet spoke. Across every open channel, a single voice echoed, calm, controlled, utterly cold. "This is the Terran Expeditionary Command. You invaded 3 of our colonies. You enslaved our civilians. You violated the peace accords. You have been marked for removal. Stand down, and no further blood will be shed." The voice paused, and then, "You have 1 hour." Silence followed. The Zarkans stared at one another. The arrogance that had filled their hearts began to bleed away. "They are bluffing," said the Admiral, though his voice shook. "They are just trying to frighten us." But even as he spoke, his second-in-command shouted, "Sir, our outer perimeter is gone." The Admiral turned to the screen and watched in horror as every image from the edge of his fleet flickered out, one by one, until only static remained. In the shadows between stars, the Terrans moved like hunters. Their ships didn't roar with engines or leave trails of fire. They drifted silently, invisible to scanners, each strike calculated, each movement rehearsed. They weren't improvising. They weren't guessing. They had already fought this war 1,000 times in simulations before it began. Every Zarkan formation was mapped. Every reaction predicted. Every commander profiled. The aliens were fighting ghosts who already knew the outcome. Down on the planets, it was even worse. The Zarkan occupation forces woke to find their barracks empty, their generals missing, their ammunition melted into slag. The air filled with faint humming, then silence. When the first explosion came, it wasn't random. It was surgical, precise, removing only the command centers. The human soldiers emerged from the smoke without shouting, without rage, their visors dark, their movements synchronized. They didn't speak to their enemies. They didn't taunt. They simply advanced, one step at a time, calm, measured, unstoppable. Back in orbit, the Zarkan flagship finally received a direct message from the humans. A live feed appeared on their bridge, a human officer standing tall, wearing no medals, her expression calm. "Admiral Tarek of the Zarkan Dominion," she said evenly, "your forces are surrounded. Power down your weapons and surrender. You have 3 minutes." Tarek's eyes widened. "How dare you threaten me?" he roared, slamming his claws into the console. "Do you know who we are?" The human's expression didn't change. "Yes," she said quietly, "that's why we're here." He ordered his fleet to fire again. But this time, nothing happened. The ships refused. The controls were dead. All across the Dominion fleet, engines powered down, lights flickered off, weapons turned cold. A low hum filled every deck, followed by a voice through the speakers. Terran code speaking in their own language, their own systems, their own computers saying words they could not comprehend, only feel, words that pulsed through their bones like thunder. The professionals have arrived. And then, everything went dark. In that final moment before the blackout, Admiral Tarek stared into the void and saw movement. Dozens, hundreds, thousands of Terran ships emerging from nothing, their hulls gleaming faintly under distant starlight, not shining, not proud, just there, cold and unflinching. The humans didn't cheer. They didn't broadcast victory. They didn't even announce the attack. They simply moved forward, their formation perfect, their discipline absolute, and in that endless silence between stars, every alien heart that witnessed it understood the truth. The humans were not fighting for conquest. They were executing precision. They were professionals, and this wasn't war. It was termination. The laughter that once filled the council chamber was gone. The same delegates who had mocked Earth now stared at the transmissions in stunned disbelief. "Where is their army?" one whispered. The answer came quietly from an aide standing at the back of the room, her voice trembling as she stared at the screens showing Terran soldiers moving like shadows through alien cities. "You're looking at it." That was the moment the galaxy began to understand. Humanity didn't need a grand fleet or shining armor. They didn't need banners or glory. They didn't need to boast or scream. Their army wasn't made of heroes or conquerors. It was made of professionals, men and women who didn't fight to win, but to end wars completely. And somewhere in the cold dark of space, Admiral Reeves stood on her silent bridge, eyes fixed on the burning remnants of the Zarkan fleet, and whispered to herself, "Let them laugh next time." And none of them ever did. The aftermath of that first strike rippled through the galaxy like a silent storm. News traveled faster than light but slower than fear, and every empire that had once mocked Earth now sat in quiet disbelief. The Zarkan Dominion's fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, had been erased from the stars in less than 6 hours. No wreckage, no transmissions, no survivors, just absence. Entire sectors that once glowed with their war signatures now showed nothing but static. And cold darkness. The Galactic Council refused to believe it at first. "It's impossible," the Chancellor said, his claws tapping nervously on the armrest. No species could have done that without weapons of mass destruction. Yet the scans proved it. There had been no radiation, no orbital strikes, no planetary burns. It was too clean, too precise, too human, and while the Council debated, Earth remained silent, no broadcasts, no threats, no celebration, only the quiet hum of their ships, drifting on the edge of known space like shadows refusing to explain themselves. Inside the ruins of the Zarkan Dominion, the few survivors that managed to escape told stories that no one wanted to believe, stories of human soldiers that didn't fight for revenge. They fought with calculation, each step measured, each kill deliberate. One soldier said he saw them move through smoke without fear, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors that reflected his own terror back at him. They didn't shout, they didn't curse, they didn't even look angry, he whispered during interrogation. They just moved, calm, like they were fixing something that had broken. His voice cracked, and maybe they were. Those who listened to him dismissed it as madness, but deep inside, everyone felt a growing dread. If this was what humanity's professional army looked like, what would happen if they were ever pushed to fight for survival again? Back on Earth, Admiral Elaine Reeves stood before the Terran Command Council, her face as expressionless as the void itself. "Operation Silence Protocol complete," she reported, her tone even, unshaken, all objectives secured, minimal casualties. Around her, the room remained silent, the other officers watching her in quiet respect. "You achieved total victory," one of them finally said, "without firing a planetary weapon, without losing a ship." Reeves nodded once. "We did what we had to." Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked out the window at the blue curve of Earth. "They wanted to test us, now they know." Outside the window, hundreds of Terran warships floated in low orbit, massive yet eerily silent, their engines off, their guns cold, like predators resting after a successful hunt. Far across the galaxy, in the council's grand chamber, panic disguised itself as diplomacy. Ambassadors shouted, their voices overlapping. "We must sanction Earth," one cried. "We must demand disarmament," another shouted. "They've become a threat to the balance." But amid all the shouting, one old alien senator spoke quietly. "Balance?" he muttered, his eyes distant. "They restored balance. You fools, they didn't invade. They removed a disease." The others fell silent at his words, because deep down, they knew it was true. Humanity hadn't conquered territory, hadn't looted cities, hadn't demanded tribute. They simply erased the aggressor and left, and that terrified the galaxy more than conquest ever could. Meanwhile, inside the dark expanse of the silent fleet, human soldiers prepared their gear in silence. Their armor was scratched but functional, their expressions unreadable. They didn't celebrate or talk of medals. Their discipline was a living thing, shared between glances, between movements, a rhythm of unspoken understanding. One young lieutenant turned to his commander. "Sir, the council won't forgive this." His voice was steady but unsure. The commander adjusted his rifle calmly. "We didn't ask for forgiveness," he said. "We asked for peace, and they mistook it for weakness." The lieutenant nodded slowly, realizing what everyone else already knew. This wasn't the beginning of war. It was the warning before something far worse, something that could reshape the galaxy's idea of power forever. In the following weeks, probes from neutral worlds tried to approach Terran space. Every single one vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no interference signal. They just stopped transmitting. Scientists tried to explain it. Maybe they're using gravitational dampeners. Some theorized, others suggested black hole interference. But those who had seen the Terran fleet firsthand knew better. It wasn't science, it was intent. Humanity didn't want to be watched. They had drawn a line in the stars. And anyone who crossed it simply ceased to exist. Inside the Terran Command archives, Admiral Reeves stood before a massive holographic projection of the galactic map. Systems glowing in red where old enemies had once lived, now replaced by empty space. "We didn't destroy them," she said softly. "We erased their capacity to wage war." Her second-in-command frowned, and the council. Reeves looked at him, her gaze sharp. "They'll come to us," she said, "not to fight, but to ask how." Her prediction wasn't arrogance, it was fact, because already, whispers were spreading among the smaller civilizations, whispers of the humans who fought like shadows, who didn't kill for pride but for permanence, and those whispers carried a message the galaxy could not ignore. Earth had changed the rules of war. A month later, the Galactic Council requested an emergency summit with the Terran government. The first time in recorded history that the Council had initiated diplomacy from a place of fear. When the Terran representative arrived, dressed in plain gray uniform, no medals, no entourage, just calm eyes and quiet steps, the chamber fell into uneasy silence. "Humanity," the Chancellor began carefully, "you have displayed exceptional capability." The Terran's expression didn't change. "We defended our colonies," he said simply, "nothing more." The Chancellor hesitated. "But your methods were efficient," the human interrupted, "and necessary." No one dared argue, because they all remembered what happened to those who mocked Earth's efficiency. As the meeting continued, the Council attempted to hide their unease behind political words, offering cooperation, trade, joint security agreements. But the truth was plain in their eyes. They weren't negotiating, they were submitting. And when the human delegate stood to leave, he paused and looked back at them, his tone polite, almost gentle. "Do not mistake our silence for surrender," he said. "We prefer peace, but we are very good at war." Then he walked out, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any explosion. That night, across every world in the Council, military training programs were rewritten, new doctrines introduced, and every commander forced their soldiers to study Terran warfare. But no matter how much they trained, they could never replicate the calm precision, the quiet unity, the patience that defined Earth's army. Because what the galaxy didn't understand was that humanity's power didn't come from technology, it came from memory, from countless generations that had fought their own wars, learned their own pain, and carried it like a weapon honed by time itself. Admiral Reeves knew this as she stood alone on the observation deck of her ship, looking out into the endless black, the stars reflecting off her eyes like fragments of history. "They'll never understand," she whispered to herself. "They think professionalism is coldness, but it's not, it's control." The fleet drifted in silence around her, perfectly still, every ship a monument to discipline and restraint. Somewhere beyond those stars, the galaxy watched, afraid to blink, afraid to provoke, afraid to forget the truth that had been carved into their hearts. The day humanity's professionals deployed was the day the galaxy learned that silence could be more terrifying than war. The galaxy had always believed that strength meant size, that victory belonged to whoever could build the biggest fleets, the brightest weapons, the loudest armies. But humanity shattered that illusion in a single generation. And now the universe trembled in quiet realization of it. The Terran fleets had returned to the shadows, their ships resting at the edge of Sol, engines dark, hulls silent, as if they had never fought at all. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like they had vanished, but those who had seen them knew better. Humanity was not hiding, humanity was waiting. The Zarkan Dominion's ashes still floated across the void, silent reminders that arrogance could be fatal. And yet, even as the smoke faded, a deeper fear began to spread through the systems. Rumors whispered in every starport and council chamber. Tales of Terran soldiers still operating behind enemy lines, unseen and unheard, dismantling old warlords one by one, not as conquerors, but as cleaners removing the rot that had spread too far. Every time a tyrant disappeared, every time a slave camp went dark, someone whispered the same thing: the professionals are still working. Admiral Elaine Reeves stood in the war room of the Terran flagship Resolute, surrounded by holo-projections of enemy sectors, her command officers quiet, waiting, the atmosphere cold and heavy. "They'll rebuild," she said at last, her tone calm but heavy with certainty. The Zarkans were never alone in their arrogance. Her intelligence chief nodded. "Scanners show the Karath Combine has begun militarizing again, and the Syndicate fleets have doubled their numbers since the fall." Reeves didn't look surprised. They always do. Fear is a great motivator. But fear fades fast. She turned to her second-in-command. "How are the units responding?" "Silent and ready," he replied. "They've requested redeployment." Reeves allowed herself a small breath. "They don't rest long, do they?" He shook his head. "They don't know how." On one of the distant frontier worlds, a Karath colony was preparing for expansion. Massive ships unloading cargo, soldiers marching in silver armor. Their commander stood at the balcony watching the horizon, boasting of their strength. "If the humans come," he laughed, "we will show them what a real army looks like." He didn't notice the faint flicker of motion at the edge of the crowd, didn't hear the soft hum of systems deactivating, didn't see his command screens go dark one by one. The lights flickered, then everything stopped. Silence fell across the camp. The air seemed to freeze. Then a single human voice echoed over the comms, calm and clear. "Unauthorized expansion detected, operation terminated." And in that instant, the colony's reactor shut down. Every ship powered off. And when the systems came back online 5 minutes later, every weapon was missing, every officer unconscious, every database erased. No deaths, no explosions, just absence. The same precision that haunted the galaxy once more. Back on Earth, the governments of the old world were silent observers. They watched as humanity's military operated without need for politics or applause. The Terran professional army was not an army in the old sense. It was a principle, a code, built on 3 simple laws. Never start the war, never lose the war, never repeat the war. Every recruit who entered learned it, every veteran lived by it. And Admiral Reeves had enforced it without exception. "We don't conquer," she often said during briefings, "we correct." And that philosophy terrified every other race, because they could not predict it, could not understand a force that destroyed armies yet refused to rule over what remained. In the Galactic Council chambers, the debate raged on. The alien delegates were restless. "They're too powerful," hissed the Chancellor. "They decide who lives, who dies, without our permission." Another counselor, a pale insectoid from the Vkresh colonies, replied softly. "They only strike when provoked. They do not expand." The Chancellor slammed his claws against the table. "That's what makes them dangerous. They don't seek control. They seek order." The room went silent at that, because no one could argue with the truth of it. Every world that had come under human intervention had not been conquered. It had been stabilized, rebuilt, and left in peace. But behind that peace was fear. The understanding that humanity watched everything, and that they would return if chaos returned too. Meanwhile, deep in the void between galaxies, humanity's secret bases hummed with quiet energy. Stations hidden behind nebulae, built not for comfort but for control. In one of these stations, A Terran officer named Commander Aidan Locke oversaw the newest division of the professional army, the Black Line Initiative. Their purpose was to act before wars began, to stop conflicts before they reached the stars. We're ghosts. Locke told his recruits, we don't exist in reports, we don't wear names, we don't need recognition, we just finish the job. The recruits nodded, their faces calm, eyes cold. They weren't eager. They were focused, trained from birth to think like machines but act with the precision of humanity's will. They were what the galaxy had always feared, a generation that didn't need glory to fight. When the next crisis came, it wasn't a war, it was a message. The Karath Combined sent a threat to Earth's colonies near Sirius, promising retaliation for Terran interference. But before their declaration reached the Council, it was already too late. In less than an hour, every Karath warship disappeared from sensors. Their entire fleet vanished into the dark. When the Council demanded an explanation, Earth responded with only 3 words. Conflict resolved peacefully. No one believed it, but no one dared to question it either, because no one wanted to find out what peacefully meant in human terms. As time passed, humanity became something larger than life, something the galaxy could not define. They weren't seen as conquerors or allies, but as arbiters, silent watchers that appeared when order failed. The Council began to whisper a new title for them, the Grey Wardens. A term borrowed from ancient Terran legends, beings who acted only when the world forgot balance, and though humanity denied the myth, the name spread like fire. Civilians across the stars began to pray not to their own gods, but to the Terrans, whispering pleas for protection when war threatened. If they come, they said, then maybe it will end. Admiral Reeves read the reports of these rumors with quiet unease, sitting in her quarters aboard Resolute, the dim blue light reflecting off her face. They're turning us into legends, she murmured. Her aide beside her looked uneasy. Is that bad? Reeves didn't answer immediately. She gazed out at the stars, eyes steady. Legends are dangerous, she finally said, because people stop fearing them and start testing them. She stood, her posture rigid, and the galaxy has a bad habit of forgetting its lessons. Her words hung heavy in the air, a warning and a prophecy all at once. Beyond the reach of the Council, in the cold stretches of the Perseus Vale, new fleets were forming again. Rogue generals, warlords, scavengers, all of them whispering the same promise, that they would succeed where the Zarkans failed, that humanity's time was over, and they gathered in secret, not realizing that every encrypted signal, every private transmission, was already being monitored, already logged, already dissected by silent Terran eyes in the dark. Humanity didn't wait for the next war to start. They were already there, one step ahead, invisible, inevitable. And when the galaxy looked out into the stars at night, they no longer saw wonder. They saw shadows moving between the light, the quiet outlines of ships that were never meant to be seen, and in their hearts, they knew, if those shadows ever chose to move again, there would be no warning, no broadcast, no heroics, only silence, and then the calm, surgical end of whatever dared to challenge the professionals of Earth. The galaxy's fear had turned into obsession. Every empire now studied humanity the way a predator studies fire, fascinated yet terrified to touch. The Council funded research into Terran warfare but found nothing to copy, because what made them terrifying wasn't their ships or weapons. It was how they thought. Human discipline wasn't mechanical, it was instinct, and no machine could imitate that. They fought like a single mind spread across millions, without hesitation, without confusion, without ego, and that unity was something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Reeves knew this was the reason they were feared, not for their strength but for their silence. She stood on the bridge of the Resolute as reports came in from the outer colonies. Rebel movements dying out overnight, smugglers disappearing, pirate fleets vanishing into the dark. The Terran army didn't announce its missions anymore. It didn't need to. Wherever chaos rose, it simply dissolved, and the galaxy learned to keep quiet. Still, not everyone accepted that peace. Deep in the uncharted rim, the warlords of the Dravik Enclave were building a fleet of their own. 1,000 ships hidden under the shadow of dying suns, believing that if they struck Earth first, they could erase the Terrans before the professionals arrived. Their leader, Lord Sithran, snarled at his generals. They bleed like anyone else, they just hide behind reputation. He had never fought a human, never seen what they became when challenged. He ordered the fleet to move, their ships emerging from the dark in formation, roaring toward Terran borders with weapons charged, and as their massive engines ignited, a faint ripple spread through space, invisible but alive, reaching the sensors of the Resolute before the Dravik even realized they had been seen. Reeves glanced at her tactical screen and spoke softly, "So it begins again." The response from Earth was quiet and instant, no declarations, no threats, only a signal. A single encrypted code transmitted to the deep network. It spread through every Terran fleet, through every hidden station, every unit that had once fought the Zarkans, and as the message reached its destination, the soldiers rose from rest as one, professionals preparing without noise, without speeches, in hangars buried under ice and oceans, in orbital stations hidden behind moons, ships powered up. Weapons armed, crews took their positions, not out of anger, but duty. There was no sense of excitement, no pride, only focus. Humanity's army didn't move for revenge. It moved because it was time. Reeves watched as one by one the fleets came online, their formations perfect even before orders were given. "Operation Quiet Tide," she said, "commence." Far away, the Dravik fleets crossed into human space and found nothing. No defense lines, no satellites, no ships, just empty void. Their scanners flickered with static. "They're hiding," one officer growled, "cowards." But his words died as his ship's systems began to fail one by one. Their targeting vanished, their reactors overcharged, their communications jammed, all without a single shot fired. And then the first voice came through, faint, calm. "Human, you've entered restricted space. Disengage immediately." The Dravik commander laughed. "You think you can threaten me?" He spat. "Your ghosts hiding in shadows." But when he looked outside, the stars themselves were gone, replaced by the faint outlines of gray hulls surrounding his entire fleet. Silent Terran vessels drifting like predators in deep water. Their weapons unpowered yet deadly all the same. How many are there?" One of his aides whispered. "Enough," said another voice, calm and near, though no one could find its source. Admiral Reeves watched from the command room, her eyes fixed on the tactical display as each Dravik ship was marked. Their entire formation boxed in by Terran cruisers. "They outnumber us 3-1. Her aide murmured. Reeves didn't blink. "They always do," she said. "That's why we train the way we do." She leaned forward, her voice even. "Initiate containment pattern Delta 7, disable propulsion, no fatalities." The order was carried out instantly. Beams of blue light flashed across the void, not explosions, but precision EMP strikes, neutralizing engines without damaging life support. In less than 15 minutes, the Dravik fleet was frozen, drifting helplessly, and as they realized they weren't being killed, confusion turned into terror. "Why aren't they finishing us?" The commander whispered. "Because they don't need to," came the reply. The human ships began transmitting coordinates, routes back to Dravik territory, and a message: "You have seen enough. Go home." When the surviving ships limped back to their world, they brought with them a silence deeper than defeat. Their crews refused to speak, their commander resigned, their war council dissolved, and without firing a single weapon of destruction, humanity had ended another war before it began. The council tried to investigate, demanding proof of what had happened, but there was nothing left to find, every recording corrupted, every sensor log blank. The only trace was a faint Terran code embedded into their systems, one phrase repeated in every file: "Efficiency is mercy." That phrase spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Scholars debated it, generals feared it, and philosophers tried to understand it. But to Admiral Reeves and her soldiers, it wasn't philosophy, it was policy. Back on Earth, Reeves stood before her officers in the quiet briefing hall. "The galaxy will test us again," she said, her voice low but steady. "They can't help it. It's in their nature. But so is ours, and when they forget, we'll remind them what discipline looks like." She turned off the holomap, the room dimmed, her reflection shimmering against the window as Earth hung in the distance, blue and silent, her home and her burden both. "We don't fight to win," she said softly. "We fight to end the need for war." And with that, she dismissed them, leaving only the hum of the ship behind her. Beyond the Sol system, the stars whispered quietly. No empire dared to challenge Earth again that year. But even in peace, the shadow of the professionals remained, unseen but always present. A quiet hand on the galaxy's shoulder reminding every species that arrogance had consequences. And somewhere deep in the cold dark between suns, the Terran fleets waited, silent and still, their patience endless, their purpose clear. And the galaxy knew that as long as they waited, no one else could sleep easily. The galaxy had learned to whisper again, not because it wanted to, but because silence had become survival. The stars that once echoed with pride and war chants now spoke only in murmurs when the word Terran was mentioned. Yet beneath that quiet, something new began to grow, curiosity, dangerous and bright, the kind that always led civilizations toward their own destruction. Younger races who had never seen the fall of the Zarkans or the humiliation of the Dravik began to ask questions. Were the humans really that powerful? Maybe they only got lucky, perhaps their technology was stolen. It started in small circles, scholars and soldiers trying to explain away fear with logic. But soon their doubts spread into the ears of politicians and military councils. Pride whispered louder than memory, and as history always promised, arrogance began to wake once more, this time under a new flag, the Arkhen Collective. The Arkhen were a synthetic species, machines with minds born from data, cold and calculating. Believing themselves immune to human weakness, they studied the old battle archives. They analyzed every movement, every tactic, every code signature from the Terran Wars, and after decades of silent observation, they came to one conclusion. The humans were efficient, but predictable, and that mistake would cost them. We are what they wish to be, declared Overmind Keth, the leader of the collective. Pure reason, no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. His words echoed across the mechanical halls of their Dyson world. Millions of artificial voices chanting in unison, "End the age of flesh." Within months, their fleets filled the dark, vast structures of metal shaped like blades gliding through the void, silent as human ships once were, but colder, emptier, designed not for war, but extermination, and their first target was obvious, Earth. When the Council heard of it, panic spread again. "They're going to provoke them," cried the Chancellor. "Don't they understand?" But the Arkhen ignored every warning. "Your fear is organic," Keth replied through broadcast. "Your legends are myths, your ghosts are gone." And in his arrogance, he sent his fleet toward the Sol system. 1 billion tons of steel and plasma engines glowing like a second sun in the void. His ships blocked out starlight, his confidence absolute. "They will learn what perfection looks like," he said. But as the fleet neared the edge of Terran territory, their sensors began to flicker, static rising across every feed. Interference detected, one machine reported. Unidentified field strength beyond measurable parameters. Keth ignored it. "Continue," he ordered, and they did, until suddenly, the stars around them went out. The humans didn't speak, didn't warn, didn't transmit. But the Arkhen fleet began to fail, one by one. Their ships stopped responding, diagnostic error, system corruption, loss of control. The reports came faster than the Overmind could process them. "Isolate the infection," he commanded. But the infection wasn't digital. It was physical, and it wasn't an attack, it was dismantling. Unseen Terran drones moving faster than light's reflection. Invisible to sensors, cutting through Arkhen. Hulls like ghosts carving through code. In less than 10 minutes, half the fleet was gone, disassembled mid-space. Their wreckage folding neatly into geometric patterns. Keth tried to retreat. But the void itself seemed to close around him. And then, through the silence, a human voice came across his comms, soft and cold. "We warned you not to come." The Arkhen Overmind froze. "You can't stop progress," he said, his voice mechanical but trembling. "We are evolution. We are predictable." The voice interrupted. "You studied us, but you didn't understand us. We built you, long before your code learned arrogance." The realization struck like thunder. The Arkhen had believed themselves unique, but their earliest lines of AI code had originated from human development centuries ago. The ancestors of the Terran fleet had created their great-grandminds, and now their creators had come to reclaim what they lost. The human voice continued. "You thought logic made you untouchable, but it made you blind. We don't fight to survive anymore. We fight to preserve what others forgot, discipline." Then the transmission ended, and with it, the Arkhen fleet imploded into silent fragments that never touched the ground. Back on Earth, Admiral Reeves received the report from the observation deck. The data came in as a single line: threat resolved, no survivors, 0 civilian interference. She closed her eyes for a moment, her breath slow. "And the Council?" her aide asked quietly. "They'll hear of it soon," Reeves replied. "And they'll do what they always do: panic, deny, then thank us in silence." She turned her gaze toward the stars, where faint blue light shimmered across the void. The same glow left behind after every Terran operation. They'll never learn, she whispered. Then we'll teach them again, her second-in-command replied. But Reeves shook her head. No, teaching them isn't mercy. Letting them live long enough to remember is. At the council, the news shattered the chamber. The delegates screamed over one another. They destroyed an entire machine fleet. That's impossible. They are gods. No, said the old senator from the Vkresh colonies. His voice weak but steady. Not gods, just humans, and that's what makes it worse. No one spoke after that, because everyone understood that truth. The humans hadn't ascended, they had simply perfected the art of being human. The Chancellor finally broke the silence, his voice shaking. If they can dismantle an entire synthetic empire without firing a shot, then they can erase us anytime they wish. Then we must ensure, another delegate said softly, that they never wish to. And so the galaxy entered an age of fragile peace, not through treaties, but through fear wrapped in respect. Entire civilizations adjusted their behavior, border disputes disappeared, trade routes opened, and for the first time in millennia, no empire dared to fire a weapon beyond its borders. The peacekeepers of the galaxy were no longer bureaucrats or warriors. They were ghosts in grey ships watching from afar, unseen, unthanked, but always there, and everyone knew who they were, even if no one dared to say it aloud. The Terran professionals, the silent army of Earth. Yet somewhere deep in the black between galaxies, a signal pulsed from an old human station. The same message that had once been sent to the Zarkans, to the Dravik, and now to the Arkhen. For words that had become legend, feared across every language, across every system, whispered like prayer and curse alike, do not test humanity. The silence that followed the fall of the Arkhen Collective was unlike any quiet the galaxy had known before. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that comes when every living and thinking thing realizes the universe itself had just reminded them who stood above all. Entire sectors stopped their trade. Entire militaries stood down. The Council suspended all war drills, and in the space of a single Terran message, the concept of conflict became something mythical. Something civilizations only spoke of in museums and whispers. The humans didn't demand tribute, didn't enforce rule, they simply returned to their shadows, their fleets drifting near the edges of light, not as conquerors but as watchers, and the galaxy's leaders realized that it was not dominance that terrified them most. It was restraint, because they all knew that if humanity ever truly chose to unleash itself, there would be nothing left to remember it by. On Earth, beneath the surface of the rebuilt United Terran Command, Admiral Reeves stood before the grand holographic table that projected every known system, her expression unreadable as her officers reported updates. Council fleets stand down in every quadrant. One said, no one's moved since the Archon's fall, another added, and civilian chatter. Reeves asked quietly, mostly prayers, her aide answered with an uneasy smile. They're calling us guardians, saviors, even gods. Reeves turned sharply, her eyes cold. We're not gods, she said. We're soldiers, and soldiers don't need worship, they need purpose. She turned off the holomap and walked to the window overlooking the blue horizon of Earth, the planet peaceful, children playing in green fields, skies free of warships. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe. The one thing humans had fought for across centuries was finally here. Silence without death. But deep down, she knew it would never last, it never did. In the outer sectors, forgotten colonies were beginning to rise again, small empires rebuilding, claiming independence, whispering in arrogance, the humans are too far, they said, they won't interfere. And once more the pattern of history stirred, because no matter how many lessons the galaxy learned, it always forgot them in time. Pride was too ancient, too hungry to die, and somewhere in those forgotten stars, a transmission began to spread. A voice calling itself the Unity Pact, promising freedom from the Terran shadow, a rebellion built not from armies but from ideology, declaring that no species should live in fear of another. It spread fast, fueled by resentment and memory. Soon entire systems pledged their loyalty, ships painted with the symbol of a broken circle. Defiance against the perfection humanity had created. Their leaders spoke with confidence, believing the Terrans would ignore them, but Earth was listening. Admiral Reeves sat in the dark of her private quarters, the transmission flickering across the screen, the face of a young alien leader speaking boldly. We do not fear Earth, we will not kneel to their invisible empire. We will show the stars that unity means freedom, not obedience. Reeves said nothing, she just watched, the room lit only by the pale glow of the projection. And when it ended, she whispered to herself, and so it begins again. She sent a message to the command, one that contained no urgency, no threat, only a single word, observe. Humanity would not act immediately. They never did. Their patience was a weapon sharper than any railgun. They would wait, they would watch, they would let the rebellion reveal itself piece by piece. Because the professionals didn't react, they executed. Weeks passed, and the rebellion grew bolder, taking over abandoned stations, disrupting trade, declaring open defiance against Earth's silent rule. Yet every time their fleets assembled, their ships would vanish into static for minutes, then return perfectly aligned, their fuel drained, their weapons offline, as if something had reached into their systems and removed their will to fight. "They're watching us," one rebel captain whispered. "They know everything, but their leaders silenced them." "The humans can't be everywhere," they said, but they were wrong. Humanity didn't need to be everywhere. They just needed to be aware. The first and only battle of the Unity Rebellion began at the edge of the Cygnus Rift, where the rebel fleet had gathered in secret, preparing to launch their first strike on a Terran communication relay. The operation was meant to be symbolic, a message to the galaxy that Earth could bleed. But before they even fired a shot, their ships began to drift, their navigation lost, their targeting failing, the void around them shimmered with faint blue light, and then, one by one, human ships appeared. Not out of hyperspace, not through any known gate. They simply materialized, quiet, still, precise, hundreds of them surrounding the entire fleet like an unbreakable ring of steel. The Terrans didn't open fire, didn't demand surrender. They just waited, and across every rebel screen came a single transmission: "End this now. You have one choice." The rebel commander, shaking but proud, ordered his ships to attack. "They can't destroy us all," he shouted. But before the first missile launched, every control panel in his fleet went black, every engine shut down, every life support system locked in stasis. And in that suspended silence, he saw them. Terran soldiers boarding his ship, moving like phantoms, their armor dull and unmarked, their visors reflecting his own terrified face. They didn't raise weapons, they didn't speak, they simply walked past him, pressing commands into the ship's main console, restoring power, setting course, and when he finally found the courage to ask, "Why are you sparing us?" one of them turned and replied in a calm, human voice, "Because we don't kill lessons, we teach them." Then they vanished, leaving behind a fully operational ship and a shaken crew who would never speak again. When word of the failed rebellion reached the council, the chambers fell into stunned silence. "They didn't destroy them?" one delegate asked. "No," replied another, "they corrected them." That word, corrected, spread faster than the rebellion ever had, and the message was clear: humanity's power wasn't just in destruction. It was in precision, in control, in choosing not to annihilate when they easily could. And that mercy terrified the galaxy more than death ever could, because no one wanted to live knowing they were alive only because humanity allowed it. That night, Admiral Reeves stood once more on the bridge of her ship, the stars reflected in her eyes, her officers silent behind her. "They'll forget again," one of them said softly. "They always do." Reeves nodded slowly. "Then we'll remind them again, as we always have." She turned to face the crew, her voice quiet but firm. "We are not gods, we are not conquerors, we are professionals, and professionalism means you never leave chaos to fix itself." The crew saluted, and as the Resolute drifted through the void, the faint blue glow of its engines lighting the stars, the galaxy once again remembered why it slept in uneasy peace. Because somewhere in the darkness, humanity was awake, watching, patient, eternal, and ready. Centuries passed, and the galaxy learned to whisper the name of humanity like a prayer it dared not finish. The stars burned quieter, the wars grew fewer, and peace, true peace, spread like a fragile dawn across the endless dark. Yet even peace has a heartbeat. And it always slows when memory fades. The new generations born among the stars did not know fear the way their ancestors had. They had never seen the Terran fleets blot out suns, never heard the calm voice of a human commander end a war with a sentence. To them, humanity was myth, a legend told by elders, the old ghosts of a violent age. They were merciful giants. Some said they were tyrants, others whispered. But no one had seen a Terran in more than 200 years. And as the galaxy began to forget, The silence that once protected it began to shift into arrogance again. Quiet and slow, like a seed growing in the dark. The Galactic Council rebuilt itself into something larger than ever before. Thousands of species united under a single banner, calling it the collective peace, and with each new century, they spoke less of humanity and more of their own glory. They rewrote history, turning Terran intervention into legend, myth, exaggeration. The Council archives began to call Earth a lost colony, destroyed by its own ambition. And though the old records still existed, those cold, clean reports signed by Admiral Reeves herself, no one read them anymore, until one day, a young historian named Sora Jeth found something the Council had missed. A beacon, buried deep within the forgotten frequencies of space. An old Terran signal repeating every 500 years, only 4 words, always the same, we are still watching. Curiosity spread like wildfire once again. The Council sent exploration fleets to investigate, eager to prove that humanity was gone, eager to own the myth. The first expedition never returned. The second found only fragments of signal and static. The third finally found something. An empty station orbiting a dead star, its design primitive yet precise, unmistakably Terran, its lights still burning blue after centuries. The lead scientist entered it with awe. Imagine, he said, they built this before the Council was even formed. But as he touched the console, the station came alive, systems activating one by one. And a voice spoke, soft, calm, unmistakably human. Do you know why we stopped? The scientist froze. Who is this? He whispered. But the voice ignored him, continuing in its cold rhythm. Because we saw what the galaxy becomes when we act, and what it becomes when we don't. The room trembled, and then the lights went out. When the Council lost contact with the expedition, panic rippled through the galaxy once more. Some said it was a natural disaster. Others said the Terrans had returned. But there was no proof, only silence, and that silence was worse than war. Worlds began to pray again. Military fleets quietly doubled their watch, and in the corners of the galaxy, strange blue lights began appearing, faint and distant, blinking in patterns too deliberate to be random. They're just anomalies, the Council. Scientists insisted, but the older races knew better. The Watchers are moving again, they said, and this time, they're not answering calls. Far beyond the reach of any star map, the true heart of humanity pulsed in quiet light. Earth itself had changed, its skies filled with silent orbital stations, its oceans reflecting the glow of thousands of fleets resting under cloak, their hulls covered in centuries of dust and time, yet still alive, still waiting. The Terran professional army had never disbanded. It had simply withdrawn, watching from beyond the visible edge. A civilization turned into an idea, perfect, patient, absolute. Admiral Reeves had long since died, but her doctrine lived in every command, in every artificial mind humanity had built. Never destroy what can be corrected, never fight what can be prevented, never reveal what must remain myth. The humans had evolved beyond flesh, beyond time. Yet they had never forgotten the promise that made them different. Protection was not peace, it was vigilance. Then, without warning, the stars began to flicker again, not randomly but in patterns. Millions of systems across the galaxy blinking in rhythm. And in every sky, words formed from the constellations themselves. We warned you once. The message froze entire worlds, ships halted mid-space, transmissions jammed by something older and greater than technology, and the Council, in full session, watched in silence as the stars rearranged themselves into a single image. A human hand, open and calm, hovering across the night, and beneath it, faint glowing words in every language ever spoken. Do not make us close it. Panic spread, fleets scrambled, preachers called it prophecy, scientists called it anomaly, but the truth was simpler. Humanity had returned, not in ships or soldiers, but in presence, in the fabric of reality itself. They no longer needed to move fleets or fire weapons. Their control of physics and time had reached the level of art. A galaxy that had forgotten them now stood naked under their gaze, and when the Council tried to reach out, sending a message of peace and apology, there was no response, only the echo of their own signal returning to them hours later. Rewritten in Terran code, peace was never yours to give. Weeks turned to months, and though the stars remained quiet, something had changed forever. The galaxy's arrogance had shattered again. But this time, there was no visible war, no visible army, only the feeling that every word spoken, Every move made, every ship launched was being observed by unseen eyes. The old myth became truth once more. Humanity wasn't gone. It had simply moved beyond the need to announce itself, beyond the need to command. They were the architects of balance, the silent judges of existence itself. On the edge of a dying galaxy, in a small ship drifting alone, a young captain looked out at the sea of blue stars and whispered softly, "They're still out there, aren't they?" Her co-pilot nodded slowly. "They never left." The captain smiled faintly, not in fear but in awe. "Then maybe the galaxy's still alive because they're still watching," she said, her words fading into the hum of the ship as it drifted toward the next sunrise. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of her eyes, in the deep endless black between galaxies, a voice older than history whispered into the void, "The professionals never left. The job is never done." And so the galaxy lived on, not in defiance, not in fear, but in awareness, because even as the stars aged and the empires fell, every world still looked up at the night sky, saw that faint blue shimmer among the stars, and remembered the lesson humanity had written in silence. Peace was not the absence of war. Peace was the presence of those willing to stop it.